Welcome to another edition of Black and Azul, now in our 26th episode. Yes, 26, coming to you from our studio right here in San Jose, California. Alex Morgan, Joel Soria, Charles Wollin with you. The Quakes, a little bit of a lackluster performance against Colorado on the weekend. Well, didn't do too well against one of the worst teams in Major League Soccer. Carlos Fierro debuted as well. Joel, what do you make of the performance?
A flat debut from Carlos Fierro. I felt like his debut was a bit rushed, to be honest, looking at, his performance. He wasn't tracking back defensively. He wasn't really offering much on the offensive/attack side of the game. Just a really disappointing performance from the Mexican. I think everyone was expecting big things from him. But I sent out a warning before he even arrived. I said he's not going to be the savior. He's not at the caliber of Cristian Espinosa, per se. He's well behind, and I think his inactivity before coming to San Jose also played a huge role in that. The altitude, maybe, even though we'll talk about the altitude just in a couple of minutes here, but it was disappointing, and I'm sure it was disappointing to everyone who watched along.
It's clear he needs more time to adjust. He was off the pace, struggled to get on the ball, and Matias Almeida said as much in his press conference today. He said he needs more time to adjust. I'd say we would expect to see more of him off the bench in the next couple of weeks, but I think he's still a ways off from challenging for a starting position. But as to the loss as a whole, I would say it derails a lot of the momentum that the Quakes have had. The last two games now, they've dropped points against teams not in a playoff position. They really need to go forward this weekend against Sporting Kansas City and get back on track, because then they play LAFC, then they have a tough run-in. There's a chance they could be sliding down the MLS table, the Western Conference table, pretty quickly.
Well, I mean, they're sliding down as we speak.
Yes, currently, right now,
live table, sixth place.
Portland, Seattle are playing live. They're in sixth place, only at the moment 1 point buffer that's keeping them in the playoff position that they currently hold. You can see it live on your screen now. It's cause for concern. I feel like at this point in the season, they need someone, a fresh burst of energy, someone to come in and really lead this team forward as they look forward to their run-in.
Yeah, as you can see on the screen there, 55 points, LAFC clear far and above. There's a 14-point gap between first and then the rest of the teams. And then as you continue to take a look on down here, I mean, there is just so much parity. They talk about this league being a lot of parity. Well, it quite frankly is. Dallas beat Minnesota over the weekend, 5-3. Salt Lake continues their good run of form, beat Sporting KC. Portland continues their good run of form, beat Vancouver. And DC beat LA Galaxy. And the Galaxy have now lost 3 in a row. And so suddenly you're looking at this table and going, wow, there's 7 teams in there for, 6 spots. And there's a gap between Dallas and Houston there. But at this point, I mean, these teams are so even. I guess my question here for you, Joel and Alex, is will there be some separation with 2, 3, and then maybe there's a couple that are similar here? Or do you expect this all the way through for the next 10? I mean, it looks like the end of the English Premier League, top 4 race in a way, right. In that kind of realm.
I think all teams are going to be fighting tooth and nail, to the last minute, to the last second. Obviously, aside from LAFC, who are comfortably going to qualify as the first on the Western side. We've been talking about this for a number of weeks now. The Quakes need to go out and they need to try and win every single game. Not because that's the ethos and the mentality that every team should carry to begin with, but because this Western Conference, at least this year specifically, was really shaping up to be one of the most historical. And what I mean by that is that, this is probably the tightest playoff race I've actually seen.
I can't remember.
I can't remember something tighter than this.
Yeah.
And it's going to keep amplifying as the weeks go on. The Quakes are slipping. I mean, that's the reality. You know, they shouldn't have dropped 3 points against Colorado because, you know, Colorado had played them only 2 weeks or a week before. But Colorado didn't play a really complete game. I mean, the Quakes had the chances in the first half. You know, Matias did say that the altitude wasn't going to play a factor. I think it did. The players today, Magnus Eriksson said it didn't. But we were able to tell that the Quakes were lacking, you know, that bite in the second half specifically. It seemed a bit dazed, a bit lethargic, a bit confused. We saw Guram Kasha, you know, mess up and not really show up when he needed to at the end of the first half, and then in the second half as well. So a lot of questions obviously concerning this 2-1 defeat by the San Jose Earthquakes, and it's going to be tough. You know, it's one to watch for sure. The Western Conference is shaping up to be a spectacle in the next couple of weeks.
And look, the Quakes were in second place. They had their chance to go forward and really claim that second place spot and make them more of a sure bet for the playoffs. Last week when we were talking on the show, they had an 80% odds to make the playoffs. Now it's back down to 75. And all these matches now are going to be of the highest importance. I think this weekend against Colorado, last weekend against Colorado, was an interesting match. It looked like they came out strong. Tommy Thompson could have won a penalty. Shea Salinas hit the post all in the first 5 minutes. It looked like they'd moved past the Columbus game and were back on the right track. But then, as Joel says, they allowed a goal right before halftime, and in the second half, they just looked really lethargic. It could have been the altitude. You know, Almeida said they should have finished their chances. I think it was just there was a lethargy that permeated this whole team, and they'll need to fix that mentality going forward into Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, you can't drop, you know, basically almost 6 points here because you were doing it the entire year. I mean, the Quakes were used to picking up points against teams that are below them in the table, and that's how they rose. And so 1 point out of the last 6 possible points is significant. And now with Sporting Kansas City on deck, that's always threatening, but not having the best year, but having to go to Kansas City to try to get the result, and then in midweek having to go to the best team in Major League Soccer, wanting to test yourselves. I think the squad will be potentially overlooking Sporting Kansas City and looking to that LAFC match to make a statement. But that after LAFC, you got Vancouver at home and Orlando City at home. You figure, okay, maybe there's some math there, potentially 4 points, potentially 6 points. And then you got Salt Lake at Salt Lake, New York City FC at New York, at Atlanta United. Then you host Philadelphia Union, and then you end with Seattle and Portland, which is just nuts. So this part in the season is the crunch time. It's the argy-bargy time, as they like to say. And what a better time, though, for the Quakes to have a second chance to reassert themselves, as you were saying, Alex, so well about how they could assert their dominance here. You know.
And look, I think the fact that we're sort of trying to go through all these potential scenarios speaks to the fact that there's, maybe some seeds of doubt starting to appear. Almeida has a really bold plan. He's sticking by his guns. We talked to them at the press conference today, and they're not trying to evolve and to surprise teams. They're not trying to do anything different than what they've already done. They're just trying to take what they've already done and continue to do it even better. And that's a very bold strategy. And thus far, it's worked for Almeida. And it could still yield a lot of rewards. They could continue to take the league by storm. Or the teams could start to figure them out, and they could start to fall off the pace a little bit. And now it feels like they're entering a new phase of the season that could be, potentially a crossroads. Either they really insist their style of play going forward, or they potentially start to fall out of a playoff position.
I think he also speaks about it somewhat generically and vaguely to not really give away all his secrets. To those who follow this team avidly know that there are 2 elements of surprise waiting to erupt. And that first one we already got a slight hint, about, and that was Carlos Fierro, who didn't really surprise at all. But I think as the weeks go on, he can definitely prove to be the factor of a game. Within the game, he can earn you those 3 points. At any given moment. But the other one, the biggest question mark and the biggest weapon, that the Quakes have yet to pose is Andy Rios. Maybe, yeah, sure, the Quakes aren't going to change their style, but they're going to be bringing in a couple of different faces that the league has yet to see. Mm-hmm. And you never know what can happen there. At the moment, the Quakes strike force is not living up to the expectations. Wando is in a bit of a drought, and so is Husen. Husen all season has not been the finisher that he was last season, that he was in 2017. Wando has, like I said, has been on a bit of a decline, hasn't been able to find that touch, hasn't been able to really get involved in this system. So I think that they desperately need a new face in that number 9 role, and I think Andy Rios will serve them well. I think he's going to be integrating himself at the right time. You talk about those 2 matches at home against Vancouver and against Orlando. I think those are great games to give Andy Rios 75, maybe 60 minutes and have him bag a couple of goals at home. The Quakes play well at home. I don't expect personally for the Quakes to drop points against either Orlando or the Whitecaps. Get these players in and get them really acclimated then, not against the Rapids, not against Sporting Kansas City, and not against LAFC. That's my take personally.
Look, the starting spot, the number 9 spot, is there to be taken. Danny Husen was really hot in the late spring, sort of the April, May months, and then Chris Wondolowski went on a really hot run of form. But now neither of them are really producing goals up top, and I think if Andy Rios can be the guy to come in and bring that burst of energy, the Quakes really need that right now.
And now it all makes sense, right? Because we were questioning this move a couple of weeks ago. We were saying, what exactly is Matias doing here? Why is he bringing on a third striker? Well,
they need a third striker.
They need him now,
They need
right?
a third striker, and quite rightly so, right? These guys get hot, they get cold. Wando broke the record. He continued scoring. Danny Husen also was challenging him a bit, and now, Rios is that fresh face, like you said, Joel, and is going to continue to push these guys as well. I was going to, kind of segue on to missing Cristian Espinosa, because we talked so much about him on the show, and we talked so much about him as much as we can here, because I don't feel like the league and the rest of the journalists that cover this league do it justice to see what he brings and how he stretches a game and how he's able to get into these wide areas, his pinpoint crossing, his crosses on the ground, his driven crosses, what he offers off of a set piece as well, especially when they practice these in off the training ground. You see special different set plays, corners, etc. How much was he missed, Alex?
I think undoubtedly you could see it on the field. The Quakes' front line was not nearly as dangerous without Espinosa there. Salinas had his moments in the first half. Tommy Thompson got on the overlap more, I think, in Espinosa's absence. But really, they didn't have the same penetration in the final third that they have when Espinosa's there. That spark, that pace. Thankfully for the team, I think we can expect him back this weekend against Sporting Kansas City. We spoke to Almeida. Yeah. He said that Espinosa has been doing well in training over the last couple of days. Nothing was broken. He had no fractures in the injury he sustained against Columbus last weekend. So he should be reintegrated back into the team this weekend, and boy, will they need him. Because we saw they simply lacked the service into the box and the pace on the wing and the dynamism that he brings to this team.
There's no doubt about it. If the San Jose Earthquakes had Cristian Espinosa in Colorado, they would have walked away with 3 points. That's how I personally feel about it. Cristian Espinosa is a game changer. He's a player that a quality player that the Quakes haven't had in years. I can't really date back and think to the last player that they had that he boasted a similar complete pedigree to the one that Espinosa has. I mean, let's think about it. Espinosa hasn't really played at a low level his entire career. And he's only 23, 24 years of age, right? You could say that this is the lowest level he's played at. And there's a reason why he came here in the first place. One of them is that he had that connection with Almeida, but the other one is that his numbers weren't quite as good in Europe. It's demanding. He was playing at the highest levels at La Liga, and he had this opportunity to come out here and prove himself, and he's done it convincingly. I think we're going to keep stating this every week now, it seems like, but he deserves to be a designated player in this league if he's going to continue on after this season. And the Quakes can't afford to pass up on him. They missed him dearly against the Rapids, and I think Matias was really hinting at that before they flew over to Colorado. He's just a player that you can't replace. Fierro can't do what Espinosa can do. Espinosa is versatile. He's two-way. His crossing abilities are impeccable, at least in these standards. He has a brilliant right-footed shot. His pace is unlike anything else in the league. He's just a complete player all in all, and I think that him not being there last week, or last weekend cost the Quakes 3 points.
Basically, Joel answered one of our VIPs questions, Eric Santiago. So if we want to flash that up on the screen, our producer, Jason Sholl will, is what is Espinosa's status? That is the answer to your question. He is training with the team. Obviously, he's a key part to Matias Almeida's plans. Week in, week out on this show, we talk about Espinosa and how crucial he is to the Quakes and to Matias's plans as well. And Eric, you're right. Definitely needs to be bought for next year. DP player worthy. I think the panel completely agrees. Just a shout out to you tuning in. Please give us your questions or your comments too tonight. Don't see too many questions in there, so comments are fine too. What you'd like to see, what you'd like to hear, anything about the league, anything about the San Jose Earthquakes. Hopefully our shirts and our hairdos are all good tonight, and we look good. Segueing on now to talk about the number 10 position, which we talk a lot about on the show. Joel, you had the chance to be at the press conference and hear from Magnus Eriksson, and he's quietly putting in that solid season. So let's hear a little bit from Magnus this evening and dissect his adventure this year playing in that number 10 role.
It was a pretty special off season for me, but I had my focus, and my focus was pretty clear from the beginning. It was to stay here. It takes different time for different players to be in a new club, to start performing, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I felt comfortable since day one I came here. Last year was tough for us as a team, but I mean, I really enjoy it now. I really enjoy the season we have together. I really enjoy the group we have. We have a great coach, a great coaching staff. So I mean, coming in and learning new things as a 29-year-old, that's pretty amazing, and I like it.
So there you hear Magnus Eriksson talking about his journey this season. Look, coming into this preseason, he was a guy on the outside looking in. There were rumors that he would be heading back to Europe, that he wasn't really a part of this team. But I think he's had one of the, been one of the big surprises, been one of the big turnarounds for the Quakes this year. He started every game but one, and he's been one of their most consistent players, if not the most consistent player for the Quakes this year. He's not the most spectacular player. We've talked about previously how the Quakes could go and buy a more flashy 10 that will, grab headlines and take the league by storm. But Magnus Eriksson is getting the job done. And I don't expect that to change. I expect he'll continue to be a consistent player this year and a huge asset to the team going into this run-in.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of another player coming into this season that had, more odds against him. Magnus Eriksson had a lot of those comfort pieces stripped from him. Obviously not intentionally, but that's the way the business worked out. He lost his coach and a friend of his in Mikel Stare at the end or before the season ended in 2018, and then shortly on he lost Joel Quakes as well. Also, he's a player that has played the majority of his career either in Europe, in Asia, primarily in Scandinavia, in his home country of Sweden. From my understanding, he doesn't know Spanish. He's not really well acquainted with the Latin American culture. And, he's obviously not American. And, MLS and soccer in America was something new for him as well when he first arrived. So there was that. There was that against him, and he quietly overcame everything. He worked hard. He really committed himself to this project under Matias Almeyda, and I think he's put a decent season together, right? Given the fact that he is not the flashiest, given the fact that a lot of his characteristics aren't the ones that really, come out and be in everyone's face. It takes a different type of appreciation to really understand Magnus as a player. He's the type of player who is quietly going to slot in and fill a certain position. He has great positional awareness. He can deliver a decent ball when you least expect it. He has a good left foot. Things of that matter. He's always giving it 100% on both sides of the ball. But he's done it well this season. I don't think anyone can argue that Magnus Eriksson, isn't worthy of playing 20+ games.
Yeah, previously I gave him a C+/B-, but I'm bumping it up to B/B+ here. And for those folks that weren't able to hear the Magnus Eriksson interview, I know there's a couple of you giving your comments. Apologize.
Maybe we can put it up again.
We could maybe put it up again here for you. But he's basically talking about his integration, playing as a number 10 under Matias Almeyda, and changing managers after Mikel Stare from last season as well. Here we go again with the clip with audio for you guys.
It was a pretty special off season for me. But I had my focus, and my focus was pretty clear from the beginning. It was to stay here. It takes different time for different players to be in a new club, to start performing, all that kind of stuff. But I felt comfortable since day one I came here. Last year was tough for us as a team. But I really enjoy it now. I really enjoy the season we have together. I really enjoy the group we have. We have a great coach, a great coaching staff. So coming in and learning new things as a 29-year-old, that's pretty amazing, and I like it.
There is the Magnus Eriksson clip with audio. Thank you for bearing through with us through his technical difficulties. But just to reiterate what Joel said, a lot was said about there being a Swedish contingent to the locker room last season with Stare and Quakes. Both of those assets left, and Magnus Eriksson, sort of had to figure out where he belonged in the locker room. I think. There's obviously a huge culture change in the locker room this season. I think that impacted nobody more than Magnus Eriksson, but all the more power to him. So much credit to him for being able to navigate that and find his spot almost immediately in Matias Almeyda's team.
He didn't struggle, and he hasn't really struggled this season.
Yeah, it's just very routine for him. It looks like he goes in there just so naturally. He just kind of does his thing, and he just puts his head down. Very Quakes, very blue collar, very almost Wando-like in a way. And
well said.
Maybe potentially you might see him have a couple more assists, a couple more goals in that position. Sure, any player in that position should probably have around 10 to 15 goals per year, or maybe a goal a game, and then maybe or an assist if you're playing in the number 10 position.
That's a lot to ask.
And I put a lot of pressure on a number 10, especially in MLS, because you see the Diego Valeris of the world, you see the Quinteros of the world, and this is one position the Quakes have always struggled with, even following this team from a young age. The Dwayne Di Rosarios of the world, and the Ronald Cerritoses, and just having good strikers. But the number 10 position has always been this very interesting thing, especially since the rebirth of the team coming back in '08 and even having the chance to work at the team for the years that I did. That's always been a very uninhabited role. And so here's a guy, workmanlike, goes into the position and does the job. So I'm bumping it back to B, maybe B+. Perhaps there's a few more goals. And then let's segue back to what we talked about at the beginning of the year, Joel, when we started this show, was, is this Magnus Eriksson's breakout year? I think I may have said yes. I'm not sure what you said, but I could probably still say yes. It's a breakout year for him here.
Potentially, yes. And I think, Cristian Espinosa and Vaco alike have made his work that much easier, right? Talk about Magnus not having those numbers, not really being, stats driven. Sure. But there's a reason behind that. Matias hasn't really emphasized that number 10 role as much as many people thought he would, as much as, your conventional coach does. And the reason why is because they've emphasized a lot of the offensive work through the wings. Vaco, for instance, who is a secondary striker / center attacking midfielder by trade, has been playing on the left side. And he's been effective ever since his run started 10, 11 games ago. Then you have Cristian Espinosa, who's a right winger or a left winger through and through. He's a winger. He's a guy who's going to bomb down up at the field. And they've been able to really make up, for a lot of the offensive work. You have Wando and Husen, who've contributed here and there when they've been on it. So not a whole lot has been asked on the offensive end from the number 10. I think what Matias wants from a number 10 is for them to quietly put together a good game, to distribute the ball well, to have the ability to distribute the ball to both sides of the field, which Magnus has done, to be able to track back defensively, Magnus has done, to be able to assist in that final moment and be able to put in that final pass. Magnus has been able to do that. And to even score goals when the opportunity is given. Magnus has done that as well. So, like I said, we continue to use the word quietly. He's been working in silence, and it's been paying off. And not a whole lot is asked from him. But what has been asked from him, he's been able to fulfill.
Look, I don't know if I'd call it a breakout season. He's 29 years old, not exactly young. I think it's safe to say that probably his best years of playing in Europe and being one of the top scorers in Sweden are behind him. But as Joel says, he gets the job done, and he's doing what's been asked of him in San Jose. So I definitely think he's been one of the players that's had a pleasantly surprising season in a year that's been so positive for the Quakes. He stands out.
I think what Charles was referring to, though, that during his stay in San Jose, this could be labeled as his breakout year, right?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Let's go to question and answer time. We're just going to take your questions. First of all, thank you guys for being patient. We're going to take the first question from Esteban Quesada, who asked it at the top of the show. Love your podcast. Curious what all three of you think of Jesse's job performance so far compared to last. Do you think he'll continue to make good player choices?
Jesse Fiorinelli, that is?
Yes.
General Manager Jesse Fiorinelli? Sure, I'll take that. I think Jesse Fiorinelli pulled a coup in being able to bring Matias Almeida to San Jose. I think that was probably one of the best hiring decisions that's ever been made in MLS, to be able to bring a manager of that quality. And I think the rewards of that we'll see for years to come, as long as Matias Almeida stays with this team and longer. I think right now they're both working in tandem to bring players to San Jose. Matias Almeida definitely has a big pull when it comes to being able to sign players. So I think that right now, as long as Matias Almeida's in this team, Jesse Fiorinelli has done a good job.
Yeah, he's finally watering his seeds. I think he tried to plant them in 2017 and 2018. There was probably a drought in his world,
to say the least.
You know, that's what it was, and finally he's been able to locate the water and is and he's giving the seeds what they need to bloom, and that's exactly what's happening. He goes out and he brings Matias Almeida on board, who has obviously shaken up the league in many ways and in positive ways for the San Jose Earthquakes. And he's also been able to, really accelerate the development of the academy, right? Mm-hmm. From top to bottom. You're talking about bringing in, 15, 16-year-olds to practices on a weekly basis. They've been able to, just really emphasize the academy as a whole a lot more, both, men and women, both boys and girls. So in that sense, yeah, I mean, he's really made up for the mistakes that he's made in the past, which, I think every general manager has their hiccups, especially those that are taking on a general manager role for the first time ever in their careers. We have to think back at that. When Jesse was hired initially in 2017, this was his first time being a general manager. He had never fulfilled the role before. So I think he's made up, and I think this year you can say that he's passed with flying colors.
And this year has been an important year for him. I think given how well the team's done, it's sort of easy to forget how awful, totally awful last season was. And when Jesse came to San Jose, he had big aspirations, and I think he moved rather swiftly to achieve his goal. He fired Dom Kinnear midway through the 2017 season it was, and instated Starry as the coach in 2018. He had a big transformation planned, and that original transformation totally failed. 2018 was one of San Jose's worst years to date. But you have to credit him for then being able to rebuild and go back to base one and build a team that's done so well this season.
Yeah, luckily he had an ownership group that was willing to back him up, right?
Well, I wouldn't be that thrilled about San Jose's ownership group in terms of the money they put into the team, but to be able to pay Matias Almeida's salary is definitely important.
But in many soccer ecosystems, if you fail once, if you fail twice, you're not going to see the third time around. Mm-hmm. And he was able to get by. He was able to be given essentially a third chance, a third coach, a fourth, fifth coach, and he obviously didn't fail. This time around, he went out, got one of the biggest names in our continent. He's here now, and
he's here to stay.
He might be here to stay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think his decision making's been really good this year. Obviously, last year with Mikel Starry, a very rough season. Unfortunate as well with that it just didn't work out with him. Matias Almeida has transformed this side. It's a new era in San Jose. And in terms of the good player choices that he'll continue to make, Daniel Vega, fantastic goalkeeping signing, lots of experience. Love what he brings to the team. Has kept the Quakes single-handedly in plenty of matches this year. Also, may have given away a point or two here and there. And Judson, I think, is the hidden gem of this, and having a good defensive midfielder who's able to move the ball from side to side, be able to snuff out any attack that goes through central midfield as the first person there, to be able to snuff that out with playing the high line that he plays. And we'll see from Marco Lopez as well. But he's made really good signings this year. And he's got a lot to be proud of as well. I think
a lot of that credit goes to Matias Almeida, though.
Absolutely,
a lot of it.
But you can still see, I would add, that he's sort of getting more accustomed to how some of the MLS deals work. Recently, Anibal Godoy being traded to Nashville for $650,000 in game.
He got the better end of that one.
That is a coup. That was an amazing deal, and I think a lot of other teams are looking at that deal in saying the Quakes really got away
amazing.
with it.
It was definitely one-sided.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do is we'll coup our way to the next question. From Daniel Zohar, he writes, it seems like teams are starting to understand how our defense works and where the gaps are. Is there something we need to switch? Is the question here.
There's some...
I can add, what Matias Almeida said today at his press conference is that they are not focusing on any structural issues. They're not treating it like a structural issue. The word he said was attention, that the defensive problems that they've had, and they haven't allowed, they haven't had a clean sheet in their last 5 games, so there are definitely starting to be some defensive issues, but that they're more related to attention, and that he doesn't see there being a major problem that needs any personnel changes or tactical changes at this point.
I agree. Bar Columbus Crew, I think every other negative aspect that the Quakes have shown have been a product of their own lack of awareness slash lack of concentration slash lethargy. You know, you can. I think those mistakes are rooted on those factors. For instance, I saw a thread on Twitter just a couple days ago. I forgot the name of the person who put this thread together, which, you know, should be applauded, because putting together a tactics thread takes a lot of time.
Especially about a Colorado San Jose Earthquakes match, right?
Right. Yeah, it takes time. But, you know, I think it was a bit misleading. It was pretty misleading. The Rapids, Connor Casey, there was no masterclass whatsoever. If you compare at the performance that the Crew put under Caleb Porter and you compare it to Connor Casey, I think the Rapids played like headless chickens, to be honest with you. This is seriously. There's a sequence where one of their right backs runs at Jackson Ewell and gets by, strictly due to luck. Right, the ball kind of rebounds, hits off Jackson Ewell's shins, and lands back on the right back's path. Now, the reason why the Colorado Rapids won was because of those attention details. Guram Kasha not stepping up to the ball, and maybe Daniel Vega not being in place where he needed to be and guarding that first post. The Quakes have, you know, they outplayed the Rapids. They've been outplaying the majority of the teams that they've been playing. It's just a matter of seconds, and that's.
I would say I would push back on that a little bit and say that I think Colorado might have done more than you're making it out to be. I would say a couple things that they did well were 1v1 down the wings. Sam Nicholson and Diego Rubio were quite dangerous 1v1. And when they were able to get past their defender, they had quite a bit of space to exploit. That's one thing. I'd say the other thing they did well was close down the spaces defensively. Columbus did this well as well. The Quakes really weren't able to work through the middle that much, and that meant that they were sort of forced to run the ball through the middle and run it out of the back more, which they're really not very comfortable doing. So we didn't see the offensive line of the Quakes get on the ball as much, particularly in the second half. So that's one of the ways they were able to maintain them defensively. And then offensively, 1v1 situations, I would say. And also just, as you say, Joel, the Quakes were really lethargic. They gave up way too much space in the middle. They were sort of a step off the pace. So they definitely should have won that match, but I think that Colorado still had to put in their work to take it away from the
What
Quakes.
have been the Quakes' weaknesses, though? I'll ask you guys. How do they concede most of their goals?
Crosses from the outside.
Set piece plays, right?
Yeah.
One of those goals came in through a throw-in.
I actually do think, though, that was a throw-in play. I don't think that was a fluke. That was a very specifically designed set play, it looks like.
I don't know how much credit
Colorado
we should
had.
give Colorado, to be honest with you. I question, and the reason why I've been hyperbolizing, I guess, if you want to see it that way, the tactical effect Matias has had on this league is because, to me at least, this team doesn't have many legitimate tactical styles. I think a lot of the teams vary too much from week to week. I don't think a lot of teams have clear-cut profiles and clear-cut philosophies of how they want to play. I think at times they rely too much on individualistic plays and on happenstance, on certain sequences that just happen to go their ways. The San Jose, along Greg Berhalter's Columbus Crew, Tata Martino's Atlanta United. Those are a couple teams that I think over the years have shown that, hey, you know what? we actually have a blueprint and we actually follow it week to week. I think other teams in general, they come up with something, and at the end of the day, when they play 90 minutes, they go against what they try to play, and they ride luck.
A lot of the teams that say they're pragmatic are, I think, oftentimes too reactive. But it takes a good team to be able to insist your style of play, and that's what the best teams do, and that's what Matias Almeida is trying to do right now with the Quakes.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, the Quakes switch off in some aspects, and this is what Joel's referring to. And in terms of what you're talking about, Alex, and in terms of Columbus and Colorado, they're good at getting in those wide areas and being able to force Nick Lima and Tommy Thompson into some tough plays. And those kind of players are used to making one-chance tackles and being able to get by that winger, be able to provide some space and step up, because they play with such a high line and they're asked, the back line, to do so much. In fact, I'm a little bit shocked that this didn't actually happen a little bit before, because they play such a high press, and you see the Quakes keep possession, and they use their back line so effectively, playing out of the back, comfortable at their feet, switching the ball from the left to the right, through the center backs as well, diagonal balls from the left back to the right back, back from the right back to the left back as well. So in terms of, is there something they need to switch? Probably not, but fresh legs playing in right back and left back, and also mixing up the center back combination. I'm not sure if he knows who the best center back combination is. I got my own ideas who the best center back combination is, and I think it's Cummings and Flo. That's who I think it is, especially from the beginning of the year. But there's a lot asked from the back line in this system, including the attacking third and the central midfield, which has certainly kind of plateaued a little bit, and the back line has been superior since after the fourth game. But if I were to make any switches, I would probably just get a couple fresh legs in there and have those folks challenge some of the outside backs to get up and down those lines and still stay on your toes, because it's hard to play all the way up and back week in, week out in this system for this team as well. So those are the things that I would switch. I know I said a lot there, but I tried to incorporate everyone. Big community. We are Black and Azul. Just make sure you can always ask us your questions here on the side. I know I got some responses.
I think a quick solution, just right off the bat, would be just to have an effective striker, whether that be an effective Wando, who's in, or newly integrated Andy Rios, and just have Cristian Espinosa on the right side.
Yeah,
that's all it takes.
I don't think the Quakes need any big solutions. They just need a fresh burst of energy, and I think that's what you were speaking to. Is that they need, at this point, it feels like it's a new phase of the season, and they need something to launch them. And that could be Espinosa's return, that could be Rios, that could be Fierro.
I feel like Espinosa offers that every single night he puts on the jersey.
Yeah.
And that's why I think he's so special, is because when he comes on and when he plays 90 minutes, it's a breath of fresh air. It's, rejuvenizing, to be honest with you. This team has not seen a player like him in quite some time. He's a difference maker, and he's also a game changer. He can, he can win you a game.
From one Joel to another Joel, Joel Velez writes, "What do you guys think of Lima's level since returning from the Gold Cup?" I'll start with this. I think for Nick Lima, he had a difficult time at the Gold Cup because of the fact that he was displaced at right back at some point. And that hurts the confidence, and it gets to you. And I think when he came back to the Quakes, he assumed that he would just come right back into the side and perform to these amazing abilities under Matias Almeida. I think it took a game or two or three for him, and that's okay. And as he matures as a footballer, you got to come back from the national team fresh and then right back into the club side fresh. And I know that there's been a little criticism here and there and some opinion. Okay, Nick Lima should stick to right back, or they shouldn't throw him out to left back, or whatnot. They're very different positions, like our colleague Jamin Moore said. So I think he's on the right track, Nick Lima. But I think he had a little bit of issues coming back from the Gold Cup, denting the confidence, getting displaced by another player mid-tournament. That's hard, and that's difficult. And so, I definitely saw a little bit of that in his confidence in his play, but I think he's on the right track here.
If there's been any duds for the Quakes this season, I would say Nick Lima would be one of them. He set really high expectations for himself last season, and I don't think he's been particularly poor this year. He just hasn't been able to match those expectations that he set for himself. And I don't see him going anywhere. He's still a solid part of this team, but maybe some of that hype that had been built up around his play is now wearing off.
You don't see him going anywhere. I plead that he goes to Europe, that he finds a new home. I think it's getting to that point where he needs to try and venture out and try to take on bigger and better things. He's turning 25 here pretty soon in the next couple of months. He's shown that he can be a solid fullback in this league. Obviously, like you said, Charles, this Gold Cup didn't really play to his favor completely, losing that starting spot to Reggie Cannon. He's done enough for San Jose. He's come in as a homegrown player. He was effective from the go. He has delivered some wonderful goals, donning the black and blue. I think he's done enough. I think he's contributed what he was expected, maybe even more than he was expected to contribute. And I think it's time to really just start thinking about, what the next challenge is going to be for him. Now, don't get me wrong. He can't leave without being on a good form, right? He needs to get back to that level that he was once at, but I don't think it's too far. I don't think it's too far from him. I think here in the next couple of games, he'll pick that right back up, and if the Quakes make a deep push in the playoffs, he's going to be a solid factor for that. So I think with that, behind him, with that, creating some inertia, go right off into the sunset and go for better things.
I think, as you mentioned, it's a good stage of his career to try to go to Europe, push for a move for Europe. And if it is just a matter of him not really fitting perfectly into Matias's system, then I agree he could be looking at potential bigger moves going forward. But he definitely needs to step up his form to attract any potential suitors.
Our associate producer, Aaron Sholl, is tuning in as well to this broadcast. Thank you, Aaron. And shout out to our sister show, The Fin Factor, which is shot right here in the studio covering the San Jose Sharks. Aaron does a fantastic job with his co-host Paul. Very similar show to ours. So if you get the chance to continue to support local media and local art like us, please give a like and subscribe to The Fin Factor, in addition to, of course, Black and Azul, and tell a friend to tell a friend as well. But Aaron writes, are other MLS teams that don't have as much talent or money going to start switching to the same strategy if the Quakes continue to dominate? I feel like it's a great way budget teams can compete. I have a lot to say on this topic, but I'm going to shut up and I'm going to throw it to you, Alex.
I'm a little bit lost as to the question.
Yeah.
Is he
it mean
referring to the
Colorado?
to coaching or making the same moves as the Quakes, or approaching them when they're playing them?
I think he's referring to the Colorado match and how they approached the match.
And Columbus.
And Columbus as well, if the Quakes are continuing to dominate.
Yeah, I think teams are sort of starting to figure out if they close down the spaces, if they play sort of a cagey style, they can take advantage of the Quakes. And I think we'll start to see more of that. I said it last week. Matias Almeida will really have to take this team to another level to be able to consistently beat teams that are very well prepared for his lineup.
I mean, Matias told me when I asked him about this a couple of months ago, and I think that quote has made rounds all over the place. I saw it on the Chronicle. I saw it on the Mercury News. And it was about Matias referring to these teams as anti-soccer. You guys remember that one? That's exactly the reason why Matias doesn't like that park the bus style, is because it's hard to get around. And it seems like most of the teams, I'm not saying all, I think the Columbus crew showed a good balance. That yes, they did park the bus at times, but they also had a comprehensive attack, right? They also had a comprehensive way of getting on the board, and that was, countering with Pedro Santos and Giossi Zardes, and it worked out. And Caleb Porter got the praise he deserved. His team was really good collectively. Now you have teams like the Colorado Rapids, who for the majority part of the game sat back with a big bus, defending the sticks. So it's tough. I mean, I don't think there's a solid way of beating these Quakes, but most of the teams that they go up against take that route, right? Which is just parking the bus and hoping they can eke out a point or two.
One team that definitely will not take that route is LAFC. The Quakes play Sporting Kansas City this weekend, midweek, then LAFC. To be honest, I don't see this Quakes team beating LAFC. If they play the way they did against Colorado, certainly not. LAFC are far and away by country miles the best team in this league, and the Quakes will really need to step it up to beat them. And that's part of the reason why it's so important they get 3 points against Sporting Kansas City, because their run-in starts to look difficult against teams like LAFC and the Philadelphia Union and Atlanta United and Seattle.
Yeah, I think when teams, to answer Aaron's question, to answer again, his question is, when teams go against the Quakes, they are gonna. A lot of teams do sit back, and because they don't have the attacking prowess and they don't have the organization that the Quakes have and Matias Almeida has implemented to their teams, they just quite simply don't. You see this a lot in the English League as well, and you're starting to see a lot of the top teams like Manchester City and like Liverpool and like Chelsea and Arsenal just have a good plethora of possession, and then a newly promoted team like a Sunderland or a Newcastle or something like that might just chill back a little bit and kind of hedge their bets. They'll play very traditional 4-4-2, two lines of four, set their teams up, how they do, and try to bide their time off of a set piece. And that's exactly what Colorado did. And also that's similar to what Columbus did, but they were smart, packed the wide areas, and were able to use a target forward to be able to hold the ball up. And in Matias Almeida's system with this back line that I just referred to and went on my mazy run here about talking about the back line, is the back line has to make tackles and has to make tackles right away, instantly in this system. There is no time, and then Judson helps and mops up when he can. But this backline plays at a high press to be able to make the tackles right away and distribute the ball right away, because they want to play quick, they want to play fast. And so when you come up against other teams that don't have as much talent or money, they are going to sit back. They're going to play in two lines of four or a 4-5-1. But as you can see, Columbus a couple of weeks ago had a good blueprint against the Quakes.
Charles, you did Sunderland quite the favor there.
Yeah, I did Sunderland. I'm sorry, I meant Southampton. I'm so sorry about that as well. Brian Abowag, currently the Quakes are 4th and could be 5th if LA wins tonight.
Or even 6th, I think, depending on how Portland's playing.
Should the Quakes start to worry due to the tightness of the Western Conference? We talked a little bit about the playoffs earlier on the show, but this is significant. And I'm not going to ask your playoff prediction unless you want to give one. But the Quakes dropped 5 points here, easily. 5 points out of the last 2 matches. And 1 point out of the last 2 matches. Could have gotten 6.
I wouldn't worry if I knew that fate was in my hands. I mean, they control their own destiny. Why should they worry? They know what they need to do. They've been playing well at home. They've been unbeaten at home in their last 11 matches, both in league play, cup play, and friendlies. You go out there and you follow your style. I mean, Matias made that very clear today. The players have made that very clear. They're not going to try and write up something new. They're not going to try and even elaborate on what they're doing. They're just going to stick to their guns, and they're going to hope that the form that they have been showing as of late is going to continue to pay dividends. I don't think worry is the right word here. The Quakes are in danger, though, of slipping, and it could happen that, in the later stages of the season, there might be a team or two that are going to be contending, at the Earthquakes' position. They're just going to have to, follow the blueprint that they have now, be true to themselves, and realize that it's going to be a grind. And I think they know that.
Look, if they lose to Sporting Kansas City this weekend, or even draw maybe, then I'd start to worry. Because then you're looking at a match against LAFC where you're probably not going to be able to pick up points. And right now we're looking at the live table here. They're in 6th place. They only have a 2-point buffer over FC Dallas and the Portland Timbers. That's keeping their playoff position. So then I would start to worry. But right now, those are only seeds of doubt. And I think if they get back on track, they certainly... they're in a playoff position, and their destiny is in their hands.
Yeah, certainly that LAFC game is going to be huge, and I think the Quakes will be up for it, to be honest, especially what's happened at home, especially what happened in the U.S. Open Cup, especially because I think that they've had this good run of form since March 30th, especially at home, and until the last couple of games have looked the part. And as you said at the beginning of this show, Alex, have the chance to go second, stamp their mark, and be that team. And so, regardless of what happens in Kansas City, I think the LAFC match is a one-off, almost a preview of what you'll see in the playoffs, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure your guys' perspective, but I definitely think it's like a playoff preview. And they haven't lost at home, LAFC. They are undefeated at home. And so if the Quakes can go there and pick up points against LAFC, they can get a win. Wow, the confidence, the wind is right back in their sails, and everyone's talking about San Jose, the national media, MLSsoccer.com, ESPN rankings, all of that stuff. And that comes, with the territory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about this LAFC game for the last couple of weeks, and we've said, I've said it, if the Quakes manage to leave Banc of California Stadium with 3 points, I think, the talk would be that the Quakes are one of the top 3 teams in the league, without a doubt. They're certainly not there. They keep falling. I think the latest MLSsoccer.com power rankings had them at 7, meaning that they fell 4 places. There's some teams that are definitely heating up. You have the Philadelphia Union, who just happen to be the best team in the East. You have LAFC, who obviously have yet to be dethroned. And you have other teams like the Portland Timbers, Minnesota United, who are, putting together solid performances as of late. So the Quakes are certainly slipping. They need the 3 points against Sporting Kansas City. By all means, they cannot come back empty-handed. That would be a huge blow to their playoff projections. Not meaning that, that would cost them playoffs, but it would put them in a shakier position. And against LAFC, well, I think they're going to put together a complete performance. At least they're going to try, because they're going to want to send a message to Bob Bradley and his side for sure.
Last week, we looked at all the playoff odds for the Western Conference. I think that might have to be a recurring segment now, and definitely keep our eyes posted on where the Quakes are going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final question, guys, from Brian Aboag again. Brian, I'm not going to answer your question that you wrote a little further above here, because you can go to the beginning of the show and hear Joel's thoughts on Carlos Fierro's debut. But I like this other question. Would you prefer the Quakes to invest in a big-name DP player that can't perform consistently, or a regular player who can do what is asked needed? I'm going to say option number 2, and I think that you've seen a little bit of that with the Quakes when Vako wasn't performing for a little bit of time here. You had a regular player in Wondolowski that carried the team, and then Vako kicked on. And now they don't have that problem anymore. Not to say Vaco's a big-name DP, but at the same time, I'd rather have the player that performs week in, week out, is asked what's needed instead of a big name DP that can't perform consistently. Because also at the same time, you hate to see a person that has a big name kind of die at the San Jose Earthquakes or have a really kind of ending to their career at the San Jose Earthquakes, in my opinion.
I'm going to have to take option 3, which is both. I don't see why both can't happen. But I think, being realistically, the Quakes already have a consistent, number 10 who's in that position in Magnus Eriksson. We talked about him earlier in the show. Now, if you're looking to add in DP in other areas, I'm not quite as sure. But at this point, if they're going out into the market for a star DP player, I would maybe have to disagree with Charles and say I'd rather a player who can show up in big moments and produce these game-winning moments, because the Quakes already have a solid foundation and are already, I think, performing pretty consistently. So I'm not sure they need another workman-like player like Magnus Eriksson.
I think the question is tailored a bit more to a fan. I personally think that we're aware and the Quakes are aware of who that third DP could possibly be, and he's already on the roster. I don't think I need to say his name again. He's from Argentina. He last played for Boca Juniors. And he wears the number 10.
Yeah.
Christian Espinosa.
And Daniel Zohar, I know you asked a question about how much would it actually cost to keep Espinosa. I'm not sure the exact figure of that, but the Quakes have a little bit of money to play around with now that they're trading Anibal Godoy, so maybe they're putting together a nice little compensation package for him.
It's gonna
behind the scenes.
It's going to be a lot either way. It's going to be a lot, but I think if the Quakes ownership is going to signal their intent to make this a team that is challenging at the top of the table, well, that is money that absolutely needs to be spent, and it is an oversight, a massive oversight, if the Quakes don't do everything they can to keep Christian Espinosa on their roster as a DP.
That's our show for tonight. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. By tuning into this broadcast, you help grow the game here in our community and in this country as well. Aaron Sholl, our associate producer, and Jason Sholl, our executive producer and director. Alex Morgan, Joel Soria, Charles Wollin. Make sure that you subscribe, like, tell a friend about Black and Azul. We're on every social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and right here on YouTube. We will see you right back here next week with post-game coverage right after the LAFC game here in studio, and some surprises as well. Thanks again. Have a great night. Cheers.